الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على أفضلهم وخاتم النبيين محمد الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. We address you this morning, Yawm al-Ahad, in the month of Jamadi al-Akhir. We made a mistake just now in saying Jamadi al-Ula. From our home here in Gombak, in Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia, to return to a subject which we addressed a few days ago in a lecture entitled Muslim Youth and the Glamorous World. We had addressed this topic about 2 years ago in a lecture delivered in a place called Saiba Jaya, which is here in Malaysia. But the topic is so vast that there are many different subjects within it that you can address. So on that occasion we took one look at the subject, but a few days ago we looked at the subject from a second perspective. In our second lecture on the subject, we drew attention to the fact that the glamour of the modern world includes its sexual glamour. A woman would be dressed and yet naked. And when young men leave the villages, the kampung, and they come to a shopping mall and they see all this nakedness and all the flesh on display, they don't want to go back to kampung. No. And so the glamour of the modern world traps them. But there are others who would prefer to preserve their chastity and live lives of purity, and who would resist such temptations to the road of zina, who would prefer to get married. And in that lecture we pointed out that the modern world, this glamorous modern world, says that she's too young to get married, she's only 14. Wait until she's 24. She has to have an education. But all through history, and even by divine wisdom, when she had reached age 14, she was ready for marriage. This is the divine wisdom. And we quoted the example of the mother of
Isa,
Nabi Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, Maryam alayhi salam. But the modern brainwashed mind doesn't care for Allah's wisdom. No, we are more wise than the Lord Most High. So she is too young. And so they delay in marriage. And in the process of delaying marriages, there are many accidents which can happen on the way. So we advised our people in that lecture, our young men and young women, to get married while you're early and to have your babies while you're still young. But then we found that there was a major problem in Akhir Zaman. And that problem is not being addressed by Islamic scholarship. What is it? The Prophet said, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, about Akhir Zaman, that one man would have to maintain 50 women. He did not say that one man would have to marry 50 women. He did not say that. And he could not say that. Why? Because Allah in the Quran has limited marriage to 4. He said that one man would have to maintain 50 women. Our analysis led us to the conclusion And when we give an opinion, we've always insisted that no one should accept our opinion unless you're convinced that it is correct. This is our respect for the rational faculty that Allah has given to you, and this is our respect for your intelligence and your reasoning power. So our opinion is that the only way we can explain one man having to maintain 50 women is that there would be a tremendous disproportion between the number of men and number of women in society. We cannot possibly understand how the overwhelming majority of men in our society would refuse to maintain women, and that only a small minority of men would maintain women. It seems more likely to us, and Allah knows best, that there would be an alarming disproportion in the number of men in the society compared to the number of women. We came to the further conclusion that this disproportion, gender disproportion, is most likely to occur in consequence of an alarming collapse in the birth of baby boys. That 9 times out of 10 baby girls are going to be born, and only once in a blue moon a baby boy is going to be born. We argued that this could perhaps be because of a number of reasons. The most important of all being the damage to the male sperm production through the corruption of food, genetically modified food. That food not only provides nutrition, but food also has a medicinal function to perform. So that your genetic re-engineering of food could deny to the male sperm what is required for the male sperms to be healthy. The other possible reason could be the damage to male sperms from the radiation of cellular phones and wireless internet and so on. We found evidence to support the second theory when we gave a lecture 2 years ago before Malaysian employees of a Malaysian telecommunications company. And when the lecture was over, someone from the audience got up and said, "Sir, Brother Sheikh, we already have the evidence that our workers who work in constructing the cell phone towers report that none of them have baby boys. None of them have baby boys. All of them have only baby girls." And so the evidence is already there to support this thesis. We're not concerned today so much with what is going to be the cause of this alarming decline in the birth of baby boys. We are more concerned with the consequences of an event which is now just around the corner. Just around the corner. Maybe not in my generation, maybe in the next generation. We're going to face a world in which there will be a huge number of women, and compared to them, very few men. Dajjal has come along with the world with the theory that one man should have only one wife. Good men have only one wife. And if a man has more than one wife, something's wrong with him. He can't be a good man. And when this brainwashing has taken place, then Dajjal will point to Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu. You see, there he is. He has so many wives, so he couldn't be a good man. So the brainwashing is actually to prevent people from being able to recognize Muhammad ﷺ as the model of human conduct. The model of human conduct. So there will be lots of men who, because of brainwashing, would be reluctant to take more than one wife. So then how do we solve the problem? A woman needs a husband not only for the satisfaction of her biological needs, she needs a husband to maintain her. She needs a husband to guard and protect her. She wants to walk the earth with sunshine upon her, with honor and dignity. And Allah did not create the night to walk alone. Allah created the day with the night. And the night without the day is not complete. No, the day without the night is not complete. It's incomplete. So she longs, she has a great longing in her heart for completion, to be a whole. So the night must have day. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what nature intended it to be. So how is she to get a husband? How is she to get a man who will maintain her, who will guard and protect her, and who will offer her some satisfaction biologically and socially? We argued the case that even if men, Muslim men, we're talking about what is the solution to the problem from our perspective as Muslims. Let the Hindus tell us what's their solution. Let the Christians and the Jews and the Buddhists tell us how they're going to solve the problem. But we are answering the questions from the perspective of Islam. We have argued that even if our men were to overcome the brainwashing and decide with courage, well, I'm going to take 4 wives. Well, I suggest that you first do a PhD in psychology. Yes, you first do a PhD in psychology before you take 4 wives. However, even Nabi Muhammad ﷺ, even he had difficulties. And once he had to separate himself from all his wives for how long?
1 month.
1 month. For 1 month, none of his wives could come to him. And when 29 days had ended, he left his seclusion and went to Aisha radiallahu ta'ala. She said, why have you come? It's not 1 month yet. Why have you come? It's not 1 month yet. He said, Aisha, sometimes the month has 29 days. So, even if our men were to summon the strength and the courage to take 4 wives, or rather to be prepared to take 4 wives, I want to draw to your attention that Akhir Zaman is an age of slavery, when riba will drive us all into poverty and destitution. That's around the corner. Because among the signs of the last day is that a slave woman will give birth to her mistress, a slave woman. So there's slavery in Akhir Zaman. And part of the reason for that slavery is, of course, the money that we're using, that is collapsing in value all the time. Like money that's leaking. No? And part of the reason for that is the banking system. And the state taking debts. And the people have to pay the debts. So you're being strangled day by day with a financial slavery and economic slavery. So how are men going to afford to take 4 wives in Akhir Zaman? Answer me. My opinion is that it is not fair to your first wife that she should have to suffer a dramatic decline in her standard of living because you want to take a second and third or a fourth wife. That's not fair to her. My opinion is that the only way you can take a second or a third or a fourth wife is if you have the means to maintain them at the same standard that you're maintaining the first. If this is correct, then there'll be very few men in Akhir Zaman who will qualify. Allah says in the Quran, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعَدِلُوا. If you fear that you cannot do it, maintain them equally, فَوَاحِدًا, then stick with only one. Stick with only one. So if most men in Akhir Zaman can marry only one, even though you have permission to marry 4, my question is, what are we going to do to solve the problem of all our sisters and our daughters? These are our sisters, these are our daughters, these are people who belong to us. And they are our garments and we are our garments. Hunna libasun lakum wa antum libasun lahun. And we have a duty to perform to solve the problem. How are we going to solve the problem? If the problem is not solved, then society is going to witness a collapse of sexual morals. There will be universal promiscuity, in which zina will become commonplace like sunshine. If the problem is not solved, then women will be stealing each other's husbands. And if the problem is not solved, then a number of women will come together and have a man as a slave. And he'll have to function as a man for all of these women. Who will control him? None of these are satisfactory solutions. Does Islam have a solution to the problem? I suggested in that lecture, and I asked my audience to think and to study the problem and offer me an answer to a question which I posed. I referred to a verse of the Quran which has been repeated in the Quran at least 12 times. At least 12 times. The word room is located in the Quran only once. Ghulibatir room, once. But this one is repeated 12 times. What is it? وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدًا. If you fear that you cannot treat them with equity, then stay with only one wife. أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. But in addition to your wife, you also have Malakat Yad. Malakat Yad. Malakat Yad used to be referred to as slaves. But the Prophet of Islam sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam did not like the word slave. So he said, refer to them as your fata. Refer to them as the young man or the young woman, not as the word slave. These were a people who normally lost their freedom. and became the property of another human being because of warfare. And since the enemy practiced the enslavement of prisoners of war, since the enemy were doing that, on the basis of the law of reciprocity, we do the same. We do the same. Slavery was an established part of society, and slaves were bought and sold. While it was restricted that you could have only 4 wives, there was no restriction on the number of slaves you could have. And the great and the glorious Ottoman Empire, whose sultans were so great and glorious, MashaAllah. How many slaves did they have? Oh yes. How many slaves did they have? They never married. Not because they couldn't afford to marry, but because they didn't want a wife who would have the rights that Allah gave to wives. And they didn't want to have children from those wives with the rights that Allah gave to those children. So in order to preserve their dynasty, they didn't marry. And instead they had a stable, like a stable of horses, a stable of slaves. And they called it the harem. So there's no limit to the number of slaves you could have. And the great and the glorious Ottoman Empire set the example. The Ottoman Empire that so many people praise, they set the example that your Sultan and your Khalifa, who you honor and respect so much, could have hundreds of slaves. Hundreds of slaves, yeah. So that's enough for you to keep quiet now. Today, it is no longer legally permissible to own a slave. The law does not permit it anywhere in the world. So now we ask a question. Can a verse of the Quran, any verse of the Quran, ever become obsolete and redundant? Obsolete and redundant in French? Obsolete?
Obsolete.
Obsolete. Obsolete. In Bahasa?
Lapu.
Lapu. Lapu. Can a verse of the Quran ever become obsolete and redundant? No Muslim can ever say yes. No. Every verse of the Quran is eternally valid and eternally applicable. No verse of the Quran can ever be obsolete and redundant. And so we ask the question, well then, where and how do we get Malakat Yad today? How can a man become Malakat Yad so that another man can own him as a slave, or a woman can own him? Or how can a woman become Malakat Yad? Because it's not only women, it's men as well. When you no longer have a legal permission for owning slaves, so how will you get them? You can't buy them in the market anymore. This was the question I posed 3 days ago when I spoke on the subject of the Muslim youth in a glamorous world. Glamorous because from the outside it glitters as gold, but inside is a rotten apple. Today I want to offer a suggestion. And this is offered as a trial balloon to set our people thinking, so that Islamic scholarship might be forced to deal with the issue. Because my listening audience around the world who listen to me would now go to their scholars of the Quran, scholars of Islam, and ask them, is this verse of the Quran obsolete and redundant, yes or no? If it is not, then tell us how today do we get Malakat yet? Meaning that a human being can become the property of another human being, legally owned by another human being. My observation, which I am now offering for the first time in public, is that there is a law of necessity in Islam, darura. And the Quran recognizes that law of necessity in matters, for example, pertaining to scarcity of food. That if there is a scarcity of food and food is not available, and the only food that is available is lahmul khinzir, pork, then a Muslim is permitted to eat the pork. Of course, only that much to survive, not the whole plate full of pork. only that much to survive. To survive. Yeah. So, because of the law of necessity, you are allowed to eat the pork. So we say that an abnormal situation exists in Akhir Zaman as in scarcity of food. The abnormal situation being the very large numbers of women who cannot get husbands, who cannot get men who would maintain them, who will guard and protect them, and who will be companions to them. A woman needs companionship. So we say because of this abnormal situation, while normally a human being should not be able to barter away your freedom, that I offer myself to you as your property when you are a free person. Under normal circumstances, no, certainly not. But in this abnormal situation, we say yes, because there is no other way. If there is another way to resolve the problem, do please let us know so we can adopt it. So we say in this abnormal situation, in Akhir Zaman, women should have the freedom, because it is the women who need husbands, not the men who need wives. Women should have the freedom and the right to freely offer themselves as Malakat yad, but only to men who are muttaqi, men who by their public conduct have been recognized publicly to be righteous in their conduct and to be good Muslims. And when such a woman offers herself freely in the capacity of Malakat yad, that she should enter into the contract, and of course it must be a written contract. It must be a written contract. And it must be a contract witnessed by witnesses. The contract should include a clause that the man who will now own her does not have the right to dispose of her without her consent. And the contract should also give to her the right to terminate the contract whenever she chooses to do so. This will protect her. There are a number of pluses or advantages for a woman in this arrangement. Number one, she will have a means of being maintained, because a man cannot accept Malakat yad unless you can maintain her. You have a right. The Prophet said, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, he said, give them to eat the food that you eat. and give them to wear the clothes that you wear, your slaves. So he has to be able to maintain her before he can accept her as Malakat yet. Number two, she had the advantage of being guarded and protected. She has social companionship, and she has the satisfaction of her biological needs. This is meant, this opinion is expressed publicly today for the first time, not as truth. No, I'm just offering an opinion. And it is expressed in order to provoke thought. That those who listen to me will now go to their scholars. Don't come back to me. No, don't argue with me. No, that's not the purpose. I'm not delivering a statement of fact. No, I'm offering an opinion. And I can be wrong when I offer an opinion. I've said that so many times. But don't deny me the right of offering an opinion. No. Go to your scholars. Go to the ulama and demand from them an answer. How are we to solve the problem of Akhir Zaman, when according to Nabi Muhammad ﷺ, one man would have to maintain 50 women? I am aware that there are scholars of Islam in the Arab world who have already expressed an opinion that this Malakat yet applies in conditions of refugees, when there is anarchy in a society, as in Syria. Then the Syrian women and the Syrian girls will be facing a situation of being refugees. And in this situation, some of the Arab scholars have held the view that Malakat yet can be applicable. But I would like that this subject now become a subject for discussion amongst our scholars and amongst our young people. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may guide us, that in our thoughts and in our opinions we might be rightly guided. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين.